Well, it's a much-needed adjustment to the history books in baseball. Major League Baseball has officially incorporated Negro League statistics into the Major League record announced by the league on Wednesday. This comes after the MLB elevated the Negro Leagues to, quote, Major League status back in 2020, recognizing the statistics and records of around 3,400 players. And now those players are a part of the official record. With the new integration, Negro League legend Josh Gibson is now baseball's all-time leader in career batting average, slugging percentage, and OPS. He's also the new single-season leader in those categories. Gibson, of course, played for 3 different teams and finished his career with 166 home runs in 602 games. A 12-time All-Star, and he was inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame back in 1972. There he is among several other notable legends. Now moving on. Let's bring in our MLB insider, Jim Bowden, to discuss. Jim, obviously, this is much needed for the league. It's also an exciting time for some of these players. Just your reaction to what went into the decision to finally make Negro League statistics an official record book in the MLB.
Yeah, this is a real game changer, Haley, for baseball, and it's going to change a lot of plaques in the Hall of Fame. So there's a lot of work to be done in the Hall of Fame now because a lot of stats and numbers now have to be adjusted and changed. But this all happened as we circle back to 2020 in December, when MLB reclassified all of the Negro Leagues to be equivalent to the Major Leagues. And as you remember, that really started with the death of George Floyd that brought racial injustice issues to our culture. And so baseball did the right thing back then. And when they did that, we all knew it would be only a matter of time before those Major League numbers would become records and equivalent to what was happening in the American and National League. So it was kind of been 4 years in the making here, but it's exciting and it's important. It's going to affect around 2,300 Negro League players. And I think for the young generation, they're going to be able to go back and understand how Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in 1947, because before then, black players were not allowed to play in Major League Baseball, so they all played in the Negro Leagues. Well, their achievements were never really rewarded. Their numbers were really never compared. And now, you mentioned Josh Gibson. You know, he's going to go down in history as one of the greatest players that ever played the game. No one in the history of the game has a better slash line than him. One of the fastest players we've ever seen in baseball was Cool Papa Bell. Again, not getting the recognition. But this also helps guys like Satchel Paige and Willie Mays, because their statistics are now going to improve as well. So the Negro Leagues had 7 different leagues, 35 of those players already in the Hall of Fame. But this is long overdue, as you said, and really, really exciting day in baseball and a major game changer.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about Josh in a minute. But before we do, Jim, this is not the first time the MLB has done something like this with the old leagues. We know back in 1969, there were some changes as well. So kind of give us the history lesson here as far as it relates to where we are today.
Yeah, as you pointed out, it was 1969 where baseball took a look at 4 leagues and they made them all equivalent to the Major Leagues. And that was the American Association from 1882 to 1891. You had the Union Association in 1884. You had the Players League in 1890. And finally, the Federal League from 1914 to 1915. So all of them then qualified as major leagues. It's interesting, though, because in 1969, the Negro Leagues were not even considered to be added with those other 4. So unfortunately, it's taken way longer than it should have. But today is a very special day, and as you said before, a long time coming.
Yeah, we talked about the impact of all of the players across the league, but Josh Gibson in particular. We saw his numbers earlier in the segment. His family, of course, has weighed in on these changes. I want to share a quote from his grandson, Sean Gibson, who told USA Today, quote, "When you hear Josh Gibson's name now, it's not just that he was the greatest Negro player in the Negro Leagues, but one of the greatest of all times. These aren't just Negro League stats, they're Major League Baseball stats." So, Jim, when you hear how much it means to the family, it kind of puts everything in perspective, how monumental this decision has been.
Well, it really is. And, you know, Josh Gibson now becomes the player with the best single season batting average and goes past Ty Cobb. that's where he goes. And I think now, because of this, I hope baseball will consider having a Josh Gibson Award to go to the player that has the highest OPS or the best slash line, however you want to call it, and kind of reward him, because I think, as the family says, I recognize the same thing. I mean, Josh Gibson should be in the conversation with Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb and Willie Mays and Hank Aaron, because he was that level of a player. He was the complete full package here. And so, yeah, this is a very exciting day. And yes, we shouldn't just talk about how great the Negro League players were in their leagues. We now have to recognize and understand that it's equivalent to what was happening in both the American and National League. And I'll also mention one other thing, Haley, is I think this also is going to open the door going forward to counting statistics for players in Japan and South Korea and those professional leagues as well. We get players like Yoshinobu Yamamoto and Shota Imanaga and Ichiro Suzuki that all come over here to the States, and we don't recognize and transfer their stats in Japan or South Korea to our stats. Well, I think this also opens the door to eventually do that as well.
Yeah, it's bridging the gap is the best way I can put it, and it's really exciting to be having this conversation with you here on HQ, because it means a lot to a lot of people. When you think about players like Willie Mays, who, for example, had 10 hits added to his career total, this is kind of a moment where it's not quite redefining a legacy, if you will, but it's certainly adding to a legacy here. So from a statistical standpoint, from the player's standpoint here, how much does this decision sort of impact players like Willie Mays' legacy?
It does change the numbers, right? I think it's important. Anyone that has gone through Cooperstown to the Baseball Hall of Fame understands, we stare at the plaques and we look at all those numbers. Well, now all those plaques have to be redone because we have to get those numbers right. And by the way, for those people that have not been to the Negro League Museum in Kansas City, I highly recommend it. It is an amazing museum that really tells the story of the Negro Leagues. And I think the important thing is that all of us just include all these numbers and all these stats and really honor all these players. Sure, the hitters were facing different pitchers and vice versa, but the talent level was very, very similar back then. So although it's not always easy to compare, I think Major League Baseball has done the right thing here. But from an historic perspective, yeah, all these numbers are now going to change for, 2,300 players. And it also affects a lot of players and where they rank in terms of hits or home runs or doubles or strikeouts, or where you stand from an ERA perspective. For example, Satchel Paige had a year where his ERA was just over 1. I mean, it was the third best ERA ever. But what he had done in the Negro League wasn't being respected or honored or acknowledged in Major League Baseball stat books, and now today it is. So, yeah, a lot has changed, and for people that love the history of the game and the stats of the game, it's going to be fun to see all these updated numbers and see where people rank now, because it's different than it was yesterday.
It means a lot of homework and a lot of studying as things are changing, as you alluded to. Jim, thanks so much for helping us break down all the implications of this special day in sports. Of course, MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred releasing a statement about this historic moment, saying, quote, "We are proud that the official historical record now includes the players of the Negro Leagues. This initiative is focused on ensuring that future generations of fans have access to the statistics and milestones of all those who made the Negro Leagues possible." He went on to say their accomplishments on the field will be a gateway to broader learning about this triumph in American history and the path that led to Jackie Robinson's 1947 Dodger debut.